Hi, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Gail, and welcome to Women Over 70 Aging Reimagined, our award winning weekly podcast. Visit womenover70.com to learn about how you may become involved. Join Aging Reimagined Circle and enjoy free participation in our online monthly programs. Thank you for listening. And a special thanks to Wells Fargo Advisors for their ongoing support.
And today we're delighted to be in conversation with Jeanette Leardi. She's a social gerontologist, community educator, writer of articles, blogs, books. She's an editor, public speaker, and an aging wellness leader. And for a decade, Jeanette was a caretaker for both of her parents. And through these experiences, she has developed, I quote, a passion for later life empowerment and finds special fulfillment helping older adults identify and share their wisdom with others. And we are inspired by Jeanette's blog, Ageful Living, and we're also very inspired by her 2024 book, Aging Sideways, Changing Our Perspectives on Getting Older. And our conversation with Jeanette will focus on the enlightening perspectives that she shares about women aging. And I'm particularly interested in the question she poses, what would you be willing to grow old for? So welcome, Jeanette. As an advocate for women aging, we're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
So thanks. So let's just have a little background. What compelled you to write Aging Sideways?
Well, I've been blogging on aging issues for about 10 years. I'm a social gerontologist, and I'm passionate about the aging process and why we get it so wrong and how we can get it right, our perceptions of it. And so I've been blogging about it for about 10 years. And then I decided I also give presentations, but those are on a limited basis. And I wanted to kind of spread the word wider. And so I decided to compile my various blog posts, plus create some new essays and put it together and publish this book.
The title is interesting, Aging Sideways. Tell us about what that means.
Thank you for asking. Yeah, I meant it to be provocative. The actual idea for the book came from another book written by an art teacher named Betty Edwards in 1987 called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And in this book, she gave her students an exercise called upside down drawing. And what she did was she gave them a photograph of an object, different objects, but basically, an object, and asked them to draw that object. So they did, let's say a chair, for example, and they drew the chair. But she found that if she turned the photograph upside down and asked her students to draw what they saw, it kind of put their left brain, part of the left hemisphere of their brain to sleep a little bit, the judgmental part, the part that analyzes and has preconceived notions of what chairness is all about. And it let the right side of the brain take over, and all they saw were the lines in the spaces between the lines. And when they drew the upside down chair and then turned their drawings right side up, those drawings are far more accurate than the drawings they made when they were looking at the chair in its rightful position. So I thought, well, what if we kind of looked at aging that way? Are we really getting aging right? Are we seeing it in its right perspective, or do we bring to it too many preconceived notions? So what if we change our perspective? Now, I'm not asking people to turn their brains entirely upside down, but why don't we just cock our heads to the side and say, I'm not sure I'm thinking about aging the right way. Is this all there is, or is this the truth? So that's why I named it Aging Sideways. And as you could tell from the title of the book, it's deliberately slanted to give that little sense of displacement.
I just found you did such a wonderful job of listing the misconceptions and stereotypes about older women, and there's quite a few. But could you what are the kind of your three favorites, your favorite misconceptions or stereotypes?
I like the way you put it as favorites, because these are my favorite peeves, in a way. I think what we women go through, which is called gendered ageism. There's a special kind of ageism just for us, because we are always there are expectations placed on us, basically from our childhood. But it's the stereotypes are based on the ideal, what society requires that we be all throughout our lives. So the ideal for a woman is we must be young versus old. We must be beautiful or sexy versus ugly. And we must be useful, but not prominently essential. Useful in, what's necessary, but not above and beyond. And then what we can only do when we have those expectations placed on us is that we grow out of those expectations. And so when we get older, society then believes we're destined to become, as I said, old and ugly and basically useless or invisible. And between the very young, the young, perky, sexy part of our lives and the old, decrepit, out of the way part of our lives, in middle age, then we have those two very historic images of the Madonna or the whore. We're one or the other. And so we have all of these expectations placed on us. So women are never the right age to be anything in our society. We're judged, we're lacking in something, we don't have enough of something, or we have too much. We're too assertive, we're too aggressive, as opposed to, what a man can, state his mind and throw out a criticism. But if a woman does it, she's bossy, she's bitchy, that kind of thing. So those are the stereotypes. Young, beautiful, and useful.
Say that again. Women are never, did I get this right? Women are never the right age in our society.
Yeah, we're never the right age based on whatever the expectation is. We're never fully empowered in that way. So,
Gail, you have something perking?
Just thinking about what you said about being essential, not too essential.
right.
Yes. Yeah, take our place, but not be too essential. Yes, that's going to stay with me.
Yeah. Yeah. We can be the, the person to rely on in the office, but it's another thing if if we want to be the CEO. We can be the go-to Gal Friday kind of person that is absolutely essential in the workplace, but let's not hope too high.
Well, on that note, you can see that I've marked many, many pages in this book, and because you cover so many important themes, and we probably can't get to all of them, but some of them are. This one I thought was especially useful, and that has to do with metaphors. The metaphors that we use that reveal the meaning that society makes, and so you'll just talk about it much better than that. What about metaphors?
Metaphors are extremely important, and we use metaphors all the time. And I think metaphors are the way we make sense of the world. We compare things to other things, and that's how we make sense of the world. But there's some metaphors that I find, or there's some situations in our lives that lend themselves well to being categorized by a metaphor. And so in terms of gender ageism, I wrote a piece in the book called From the Catcall to the Catacomb. And what I mean by that is when we're young, and I'm sure many, and if not most, or if not all of the women listening to this can identify, when we're young and we're walking down the street, we get the catcall, we get the whistles and the comments, or somebody sneaks up behind us and whispers something in our ear, and whatever. That's when we're young. We're objectified, we're sexualized. When we're old, we are then relegated to being invisible. And so the metaphor I came up with for that is the catacomb. And I go back to the ancient Roman times where, a displaced sect or a discriminated sect like the early Christians they'd had to go in underground to hide away, or they were, considered out of society. And so they found their own refuge away from society. So as we're older, we become more invisible. We're encouraged to just kind of, disappear, just do your thing. We'll carry on without you. Thank you very much. So it's from the catcall to the catacomb. But then I say we should neither be one or the other. What we need to be are catalysts. We need to advocate for ourselves, and we need to be the people who will change our society from the inside out. So we're the ones who can make the connections. We're the ones who can lift other women behind us as we move up, as we make progress. And this is, this has been going on for decades. Women's empowerment has been going on for decades, like all civil rights issues that takes decades to make progress. But those are the powerful metaphors. We're either very visible in terms of the catcall, or we're invisible. And we got to be somewhere in between, saying, no, I'm here, I've got stuff to contribute, and I'm going to help bring this change about so that women after me don't have to go through this too.
Yeah.
You also talk about, there's a metaphor that you talk about in your book about being over the hill. So help us reframe that one.
That's another one that's pretty amazing. Over the hill. I mean, I'm sure many of us have gotten these over the hill birthday cards or the black balloon, whatever. But over the hill implies or means that, at some point we keep rising throughout our lives into middle age. And then at one point, it's going to be all downhill from there. That aging is nothing but deterioration and decline. And that's the main stereotype we have to bust. That age is something to dread, that age is getting, older is something that will just ultimately make us fall apart. And so this over the hill metaphor is just so huge in our society. Well, I say, let's take a look at the terms we're using. What does it take to climb a hill? To climb a hill, you need strength, you need endurance, you need some practice climbing other hills if you want to climb a particular hill. You need the right tools. You might need the advice of someone who's climbed the hill before you. So that's what all the skills it takes to climb a hill. And the way I view getting older is no one is ever over the hill. No one is ever over the hill. What we are is that in our lives, we're at the top of a particular hill. And what we see when we get to the top of that hill are other hills in the distance yet to climb that we didn't even know were there before we just climbed that hill. We couldn't see it from the bottom of the hill before we climbed it. So we older adults are continually climbing. By the way, I'm 72, and I always take advantage of the opportunity to not only state my age, but declare my age. And I think women especially, we need to be doing that. This whole notion of don't ask a woman, it's not polite to ask a woman her age. Why not? It's like asking where you were born or what you do for a living. It's just a fact like anything else. So that's what I believe, is that we're never over the hill. We are the master climbers. We've had decades of climbing one hill and then another hill and then another hill. So we're never over the hill. We're the master climbers, and we're also the master changers. We are constantly adjusting to change in the world. I ask people, what was the telephone like when you were a kid? If you had the rotary phone stuck on the wall with the spirally cord that kept getting knotted up, and you couldn't walk around the house, and now you have a smartphone, you've changed. Think of all the technology that you have adapted to. And not only that, our bodies change. We have to get used to that and constantly make adjustments. And then also, very importantly, we start to lose people in our cohorts, our friends, our spouses. Those are huge changes that we adjust to. So if you want to know what it's like to climb a hill or to adjust to change, you ask an old person. We are the experienced ones.
Why age matters?
Yes, age matters. There's some words that are used to describe people who are in the aging services field, and they use words like ageless. Ageless beauty, or ageless, just be ageless, or age is just a number, or if somebody asks me my age and they say, oh, you're 72 years young. No, I'm 72 years old. I have earned every year of my life. Age is not just a number. Age is important in the sense that it's a cumulative process. Age shouldn't be important in the sense of how you judge someone. It should be competence. We should be judged on our skills, not on our, per se, chronological age. But we shouldn't be denying our age either. So I don't want to be ageless. I want to be age-full. And that's why I call my blog Ageful Living.
You also talk in your book about the different relationships someone might have with age, and I think it would be helpful if you would identify those different types.
Sure. again, this is part of this aging sideways paradigm of mine. It's like, let's kind of see aging in quirky, refreshing, and, surprising ways. So what if our relationship to aging would be similar to our relationship to a person? How do we see age in our life? What kind of relationship do we have with this concept of age? So there are 4 ways I think we can relate to aging. We can see aging as an enemy. In fact, in which case we're going to fight getting old at all costs. We're going to have Botox. We're going to dye our hair. We're going to leave important dates off our resumes because we're just fighting aging. We're not going to to give into it at all. So aging can be like an enemy to us. But aging can also be a stranger to us. We're in total denial. Old? I'm not old. I'll never get old. So that's more, rather than fighting aging, it's flight more than fight. We're gonna run away from the concept. Oh, don't talk to me about getting old. I'm not old. I'm never gonna get old. We can talk about aging as a neighbor, and maybe the kind of neighbor that, you kind of tolerate and you see mowing the lawn as you're going out in the morning to pick up the paper or whatever it is you're, out there doing. And you say hi, but you don't really want to get into much of a conversation. And so you endure and tolerate that person, but you're not that thrilled to be engaged with that person. Well, same thing with aging. You can tolerate aging, like, okay, I'm going to have to get a new pair of glasses because my eyes are going. Sigh, poor me, kind of thing. But finally, here's the relationship I think we should all have. Aging should be a friend that we value and we savor, a friend that we will defend, a friend that we will embrace. And so why don't we make friends with the aging process? Why don't we say, hey, it's kind of cool to be old. It's kind of cool to get older. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the reason why we don't see aging as a friend is because we don't really know the good things about getting older. And I love talking about those good things, especially what happens in our brains as we get older. Because people think that we just become we become demented in some way, which is not really usually the case. But we have a lot of brain skills that we get as we get older. So aging can be a real friend, one you want to hang out with. And we're all going to hang out with that friend if we're lucky enough. So why don't we make friends with it as early as possible?
Can you say more about the aging brain?
Sure. I'm not Pollyanna-ish about getting old. There are some things that we do, some abilities we do tend to lose as our brains age. Our brains start to shrink, and we're not as good at what younger brains can do. Younger brains can process information very quickly, pick things up very quickly. Younger brains are also good at multitasking, which is doing 2 different tasks, flipping back and forth between 2 conscious tasks, doing task A, then quickly going to B, then back to A, going to C, that kind of thing. Younger brains are good at that. But here's what older brains are good at. And it's all based on the fact that our brains change. Our brains are plastic, and we actually change them from nanosecond to nanosecond. We have about 100 billion nerve cells in our brains, and each nerve cell has the potential, scientists estimate, to connect to 10,000 other cells in our brain. We only grow those connections through experience, through time, and through active engagement. So it's important to keep your brain engaged, keep challenging yourself. That's how you can grow all of these superhighway connections in your brain. So when person my age, let's say, I have trillions more connections in my head now than I had when I was in my 30s. Trillions more connections. What does that mean? Well, one of the great abilities of getting older is because we have all of these superhighways in our brain, we have access to all of our learning, multiple paths to take. So we can judge a situation or solve a problem from many different perspectives. We can see not just the black and white areas of a problem as we would when we were younger. Young brains will say, hey, let's do this or let's do that. Older brains, we now see more of the gray areas, the what ifs. Well, that's a good idea, but we may have to watch out for this happening. So we get to be better at quality control the older we get. We get to see life is more complex, and we appreciate that complexity, and we're more aware of that complexity. So that's just one gift that we get, one skill we develop. Another skill we develop is information discrimination. We get to know faster and more accurately what piece of information is important and what's not important when you want to do a task. Oh, you can skip all of those steps from A to D. You could just go right from A to D. You don't have to go through B and C. We know the shortcuts. We've invented the shortcuts. So we know what's important, and it manifests itself often when we say, I don't want to be bothered with that kind of task anymore. Or actually, I don't want to be bothered with people like that who bring me down. Life is too important. Life is, my time is precious to me. And that's another thing. Time becomes more precious to us the older we get. So we kind of separate the wheat from the chaff better as we get older. I don't want to be bothered with that kind of stuff. And then here's another one really great ability as we get older. Yes, we slow down in our processing because we have all of those superhighways in our brain. So it's going to take longer for a signal to get from point A to point B when every two nanoseconds there's a fork in the road. Does it go to the left or go to the right to get to that part of our brain? I like to explain it this way. Imagine a 35-year-old healthy brain that has everything that person has learned. Is like having a library in that person's head, all the experiences, all the facts that they have absorbed. And you ask that 35-year-old brain, okay, you have a library? Go find me Huckleberry Finn. Go find me the book Huckleberry Finn. Well, that 35-year-old brain is going to go right to the shelf where Huckleberry Finn is, pull down the book, say, here it is, there you are. That's that fast speed of processing. Let's say you have a healthy 75-year-old brain. It's got to be healthy, which is why we got to do things. It's important to do things to keep our brains healthy. So you've got a healthy 75-year-old brain. But that library is not 100,000 books. It's 100 million books. And so floors have been added to that library, and the aisles are longer, and there are many more shelves. So you ask that 75-year-old brain, go find me Huckleberry Finn. Well, all right, give me a minute. I think it's in the back room. No, I think it's in the box in the basement. Give me a minute and I'll get to it. So it's going to take us longer to get Huckleberry Finn. But here are two advantages to the older brain. One is, chances are, with our experiences, we have come across at some point reading Huckleberry Finn, which we may not have had the chance when we were in our 30s. The longer we live, the greater the possibility that we have accumulated a particular piece of knowledge. The second advantage is our ability to see things from different perspectives gives us that ability to say, hey, if you like Huckleberry Finn, I got 5 other books I can recommend you're going to enjoy. So that's another gift of the older brain.
Thank you. Dale, are you have anything?
Well, I'm really listening to you and taking it all in, and but I'm wondering. It seems we just had this conversation with another guest, and that has to do with spirituality. How are we thinking about spirituality different as we age?
I think we do. I rely on the work of a developmental psychologist in the 1950s named Erikson, and he came up with a paradigm that he calls the 8 stages of personality development. And what he believed was, at every stage of life, from birth to death, we have a challenge. We have a certain task to learn, and the result of learning that task adds a certain positive trait to our personality. I won't go through all of the stages with you, but he goes up to 8 stages, and so stage 7 would be from like our 40s to our early 60s. And he believed that stage was one called generativity, wanting to give back. And as we get older, we start to lose that sense of, or not lose, but don't find it as important to be acquiring things and doing stuff for me. We start to look broader. How can I make a difference in the world? How can I contribute? And that's called generativity. What kind of legacy am I going to leave? When we think about leaving a legacy to our families, but also to the greater good of society. How can I make a difference? And that, again, is because we also have an awareness of our time, that we have fewer years ahead of us than are behind us. So we do think in those spiritual terms, and I'm using spirituality broadly. I'm not limiting it to being religious, but just spiritual in the sense of something greater than who we are as individuals. So we do start to think of that. That's stage 7, according to Erikson. Stage 8, which he categorized from ages 65 and beyond, is the task is of that stage is to learn something called integrity, integration, putting it all together, making sense of your life. So it's that later stage in our life as we get older, and again, we're aware of the passage of time and the finality of time and our more greater awareness of our mortality. We begin to think of what was my life about? What have I done with my life? What does this all mean? Where am I going with all of this? So that's integrity. And when we have this sense of integrity, we develop the trait of wisdom. Oh, by the way, in stage 7, when we develop that generativity, we develop compassion. That's the gift of wanting to give to the world. It's not to say we don't develop it earlier, but that's what we focus on. That's what we want to develop. So in stage 8, it's wisdom. And we get the kind of wisdom, it's not to say you can't be a wise child or a wise teenager, but there's a special kind of wisdom that only comes the longer we live and the more we've experienced. So yes, I do believe that we become more spiritual in those ways. Now, one thing I want to point out is Erikson created his paradigm in the 1950s. And in the 1950s, the life expectancy at birth was about 65. So he ended his stage 8 at 65 plus. Maybe you'd live a couple of years past 65 if you're lucky. Well, today, our life expectancy is into the 80s. And so I like to think, what would Erikson come up with? Would he come up with a stage 9? And what I think a stage 9 would be, for me, I would posit, would be the task of transcendence, is to finally lose that sense of ourself as a total individual and just see us as a part of all that is. And so the gift of that stage would be unity, just the sense of unity with everything. So I'm kicking it up a notch spiritually, but I do think we do get more spiritual the older we get.
Yes. I think actually it's true.
Yeah.
I've spoken to, who's in their 80s especially. I think that people do become much more spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In the couple minutes we have left, Jeanette, you mentioned earlier about advocating for ourselves. And can you say more about that? And because many people would say, it's just me. There's nothing, I don't have any influence or power so how do you think about advocacy for ourselves?
Great question. Advocacy is the way we're going to get rid of ageism. We gotta speak out. We've got to advocate for ourselves. Now, yes, I think that's a common thing, and especially among women, we tend to be, again, the way we were raised, and all of the social pressures on us is, be assertive and not too assertive. We hold ourselves back a lot of times. Well, what I think we should be doing is starting with where we are. So first, let's get aging straight in our own brain. So we advocate for ourselves in the sense that let's remove any sense of internalized ageism we may have. Let's start to rethink, no, I don't think I've been thinking about aging the right way. If we've ever said to ourselves or to someone else, I can't really learn this at my age. I'm too old to learn this. Or, what will somebody think of me if I wear this particular kind of clothing, or if I look a certain way? I mean, people, maybe they'll make fun of me. Let's get rid of that sense of internalized ageism, because I think we stop ourselves right at the beginning when we hold ourselves back with those kinds of perceptions. That being said, once we feel that we are worthy of getting old and we have gifts to share when we get old, then the next thing I think we can do is advocate within our own little circles. A friend, a family member says something that makes fun of old people. And boy, do we have plenty of examples of those in our society. I mean, think of all the ads we see on TV that we laugh at. I've fallen and I can't get up. Or think of the late night talk show host monologues, constantly making fun of old people. Well, if somebody makes a casual ageist statement in your presence, we can assert what I call the power of one, power of ourselves to say, that could be kind of hurtful to an older person, or, that's not really true of us older people. We're not all like that, So, and we can do it with a sense of humor. I'll give you an example. This has happened to me more than once in the checkout line of a supermarket. I'm checking out, and the cashier is clearly decades younger than me, and says to me, did you find everything you liked, that you wanted today, young lady? And so, and she was trying to be nice to make me feel that, behind that kind of elder speak, that kind of term, young lady, is meant to calm me down and make me feel good about, I'm not really as old as I seem to be, because being old is a bad thing, remember? So she's trying to make me feel good. So what I've done is to say, and use kind of humor, and I say, oh, I'm sorry, do you have eye problems? I'm not really a young person. I'm an old person, and I'm okay with it. And you know what? You can be okay with it too. And that usually a smile comes to her face. It's like, okay, we all both get the joke, but I've kind of said, that's a joke that you don't really need to do, So we can just advocate for ourselves. If you go to the doctor's office and you're with you bring your adult son or daughter to the doctor's office, and the doctor talks to your child, but not to you, you can correct the doctor, say, doc, I'm the patient here. You can really talk to me. If you want to talk to my child later on, let's find time for that later. But I'm the patient, and I can understand what you're trying to say. So there are ways to correct. So that's the power of one in our own little circle. But then there's the power of one in the greater society. If you see a headline on a story that talks about an older woman, and the headline calls her a granny, but the article has nothing to do with her being a grandmother, you can write to the editor of the paper and say, that headline was misleading and it's demeaning. If you see an advertisement that you find offensive, write to the company whose product is being advertised. Or if you want to go deeper, find out who the ad agency is and write to the ad agency and say, do you have any old people on your marketing teams? Because if you ran this by old people, you'd probably get a different reaction and you might not have put this on the air. So that's what I mean about advocating and the power of one. I actually did this with a greeting card that I was sent, an over the hill greeting card I was sent for my birthday. And what I did was I whited out the name of the person who sent it to me, and I found out who the chairman of the board of the CEO of the company that produced the card. It was a big company, national greeting card company in this country. I wrote to him on the inside saying, I'm a social gerontologist and this card is offensive, and you probably wouldn't want to be creating cards like this for old people, just like you wouldn't do a sexist or a racist card. And I got a letter back. I went right to the top. That's another thing about the power of one. Just go right to the top and take your chance. You can be kicked down a couple of flights on the ladder. But I got a letter back from the vice president of creative products, or whatever she was called. And she said, thank you for your card. And I've instructed my teams, we're going to have a meeting to talk about more creative and positive ways to create our greeting cards. And several months later, they started putting out a more positive line of cards. Now, I may not have been the only one that objected, but I just did my part. So that's what I mean about the power of one.
Do you want to ask our favorite question, Gail, as we...
For Jeanette, how are you thinking about your own aging?
I'm thinking about it pretty positively, actually. And, I'm glad you're asking this, because a very important study was done at Yale University by a psychologist named Becca Levy. And she and her team found that if you have positive, and I mean accurate, positive equals accurate, not Pollyanna and the world is wonderful. There's a lot of things that are not so great about getting old, but accurate about getting old. If you have those kind of accurate views, you can actually extend your life on average by 7.5 years. And you can reduce your chance of getting dementia by about 50%. So I'm feeling pretty good about getting older. What I'm not feeling good about is that a lot of the responsibility is up to the individual to do all the things we need to do to stay healthy. Yes, we need to do certain things, but I'm not feeling good about the fact that our society doesn't support us older people in terms of the opportunities and the skills and the wisdom that we have to share. We're still being blocked in sharing that. So as I continue, however much longer I've got, I'm going to stay on this road to start changing people's minds about aging, because society has to chip in. We can do our part, but society is at least 50% responsible for how well we age.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jeanette. You've laid out a wonderful agenda for all of us. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And listeners, we'd like to see more of you at our online monthly programs. Make your voice heard as together we change the conversation about women aging. Visit Aging Reimagined Circle at womenover70.com. And if you enjoy the Women Over 70 podcast, check out Older Women and Friends at janeleader.net, LEDER, janeleader.net. Jane and her guests take a deep dive into the joys and challenges of being an older woman in our society.